Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. It is a spin-off of the website and book review site of Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast is about book reviews, a writer's muse, a book's peruse, author interviews, and literary news. Welcome to the new year, where new things may happen with this. I hope you all enjoy, and thank you for listening.
Okay. So, good evening, listeners. I'm Amy, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Today, we are joined by an author. Please introduce yourself and let the audience know how they can connect with you.
Thanks a lot, Amy. My name is Ivy Schweitzer, and I am actually a retired professor. I was an academic for many years and taught at Dartmouth College. I taught English, American literature, and women and gender studies. And I've always written poetry, but before retirement, but certainly since retirement, I've just been dedicating all my time to poetry. And I'm so excited that my debut solo collection is appearing hopefully at the end of this month from Finishing Line Press. Title is Dividing Rivers, which is a reference to the Connecticut River in the Upper Valley where I live. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that. And you can learn more about me, and I've done a lot of writing, a lot of academic writing, but also a lot of poetry at my author site, which is at sites.dartmouth.edu/Ivy Schweitzer.
Oh, great. Thank you. I love poetry. I've been writing poetry all my life, and I love it when there's always that person who thinks that all poems have to rhyme. I'm like, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't rhyme like it's supposed to. Oh, that just, I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. My father was a fan of Robert Burns, and I just kind of that was one of the things that we could connect with when I was younger, was poems. And he had there was this picture in a magazine of a rose, and then it had Burns's, my love is like a red, red rose. Mm-hmm. And my father gave that to me, and to this day I just cherish it. Right now he's at the end of life stage for dementia, but he had always been a poet at heart. So that was like really important to me, that we had at least a little bit of connection, because we didn't always see eye to eye. So you said you've been writing poetry for a long time. When did you start? I mean, what gave you that inspiration?
Well, first let me say I'm sorry to hear about your dad, but it's lovely that that he was a poet at heart, and maybe you can share poetry with him in this difficult time as he passes into the next realm.
Yeah.
I just remember writing poetry as a very young age. And I remember, I think my first poem that I actually published, I think I was about 10 or so, or 12. It was about, and of course, it's about grief. It was about my grandmother dying. And this was my father's mother, I was very close to. And I used to have sleepovers at her house, and she would make rag curls in my hair. She was from, quote, the old country. She was from Romania. Her first language was Yiddish, which is, of course, relevant to this book of poetry.
Yeah.
And when she died, we cleaned out her apartment, which was over my father's, the store that my father worked in. He made curtains and slip covers. He was kind of like a genius with a sewing machine, actually. And what I remember, and what the poem is about, is finding piles and piles of pennies in her closet. Just as piles of them. So I don't really know what she was doing with those pennies, saving them.
Wow.
Pennies were more valuable at that time. Now I think we're getting ready to phase them out practically.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of an image of, I don't know, of somebody not hoarding, but holding on to something that was really kind of mysterious in some way or ephemeral. And that was what the poem was about. I think it was called Pennies. Then it got published in some little, newsletter, some local newsletter or something. But that was it. Then you're hooked. Then you're hooked.
Yeah. Yep.
To be able to capture a moment, an experience, an emotion, especially grief. I think a lot of poetry is about grief and loss.
Yeah. And sometimes, even when you're like a teenager and you go through that dark stage, I've been there. And I always found that it was just something that I could just, if I didn't have anybody to talk to, I could write it down. And I still do that now. I whatever's on my mind or in my heart, I just write it down. And sometimes it's a poem and sometimes it's just something I've written. But, I always found that it was, there's something about, like, when I read your poems, I could feel, like your passion and that it's emotional, and I can, feel that reading that, and, however you intended your poem to be, I can interpret it in different ways, but either way, it's always beautiful. And that's what I think is one of the great things about poetry, because you don't have to come out and say, I'm sad, or I am grieving, or, you can invoke these powerful words that kind of, make whatever you're feeling more, I don't want to say romantic, because I don't mean it in like a romance type of thing, but in a way that people can understand it, and maybe some can't understand it. I mean, I still read Shakespeare and Whitman, and, if people are like, you read Shakespeare for fun? Yes, I do.
It is fun sometimes and challenging.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I think what you're getting at is the way poetry speaks to our bodies, our emotions. I mean, emotions seem abstract, but they're not. They're really in our bodies. And that's what poetry does, which is why people think that it ought to rhyme, because it's the rhyme that is so visceral, that we feel the rhyme. And I would say that I don't usually rhyme in my poems, but there's certainly a music to, there's, I reach for a music that expresses the emotion or sets the scene or brings it to the reader in more than just kind of a mental way, but more like a visceral way. I think that's the hard part, actually, is getting the poems to do that, because we never come out and say we're sad or we're happy or whatever. Right. It's how do I invite you into the emotion that I am feeling with the arrangement of words that I can somehow evoke from somewhere else? Because sometimes, and I think every writer feels this way, you don't know where it comes from.
That's true. Yeah. I used to, when I was young, we had some woods near us, and I would go there. I had a little trail, but I would just sit there, bring my notebook and my Walkman, and I would just close my eyes and write. And, I was just able to do that. And sometimes I can do that. I can just close my eyes, just sit down and go someplace, or just in my room and just write and see what comes out. And it's always, I find it that when you're writing it, it feels so personal. But then when you have the courage to share it with others, it's just like writing anything that you don't know how someone else is going to react. But I think that poetry is that one thing that is so personal, but yet it can make others feel that it's personal to them as well.
Well, it's interesting you talk about courage, because this particular collection of poetry has has really drawn on my courage to publish it, because people have not liked it. A lot of my friends have not liked it. They feel like the poems are provocative or even kind of on the edge of being offensive because they're about race. I think whenever one talks about race, that's what happens. We just, our hackles get up and our defenses get up. And what I was trying to do in this book is really evoke an earlier mindset where my attitudes about race as a white Jewish woman came from. And it was not necessarily nice places. I had to indict my community, which I feel helped me inherit kind of racist attitudes, attitudes about superiority. And that was just not, that was really, it was hard to write about that. It was really hard to write about all that. And I'm not, even now when I read it, I think there are poems that I would maybe chuck, not put out there. I mean, I had to write them. Mm-hmm. As a good friend of mine said to me, you had to write these poems. And I wrote them, and hopefully some people will get something out of them, will feel my feelings and feel the kind of vulnerability. And then I'm going to go, and then now I've gone on, and it really has given me a kind of creative lift. So actually my second project is almost done.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Can't wait to read it.
I'm so excited about that. And it's also got a Jewish theme. It's actually a rewriting of the book of Genesis from Eve's point of view. So kind of from a feminine or feminist point of view. And also all these and also from an ecological point of view, because all these creatures and animals speak poems. Mm-hmm. So the thrush has a poem, and the moth has a poem. The serpent has a poem, of course. Death has a poem in that. So I started to write in other voices, and I think writing this book about my own struggles with my own identity, my own racism, my own, internalized kind of sexism, was really important and allowed me a kind of freedom, a creative freedom.
Oh, definitely. I loved reading this book. I loved reading your poetry, and I thought it was pretty amazing. I mean, I'm not Jewish, but I do kind of understand some of the culture, and of course, yeah, racism seems to be a big thing, and I think it's always been that way. And I think it's ridiculous. I know this other author, I've read his work, and a lot of it, he's Jewish, so it involves his, sometimes traditions or things that may just seem like they're way out there unless you understand. And I don't think you have to know somebody's culture, inside and out in order to read about, whether it's triumphs or tragedies or other things that happen as a part of it, things that, sometimes there are things that need to be said, and the one who says them, is stronger for it. And I'm a white disabled woman, and I've only become more disabled the last few years, but people look at me differently than they used to. And they, I get that. Some strangers are overly kind, and then there's some that are just like, oh, get out of my way. And when they say that, and I've had people say, just get out of my, and then some expletives, and I'm like, oh, well, have a nice day. And they don't know what to say after that. It's like they want to fight or something. But dogs love me now. I'm like a dog magnet. I guess because I can see eye to eye with them more when I'm sitting in my chair. But before I was disabled, I was a woman, and when I worked in the technology field for years. I was, in a cubicle and did things, and 90% of the people in my field were male.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some men that don't like being, having a superior that is a woman, so that's kind of difficult too. So, but just being able to, when I was, like I said, when I was reading your work, and do you have a poem you could read?
Yes. And I just wanted to say something about the dogs. I think dogs or creatures sense people who are different or hurting, or, you know what I'm saying? Or on wavelengths somehow, and need to just be stood next to. You know what I'm saying? And supported.
Yeah, because I'll go out.
Yeah.
And, I have a mobility scooter. I'll use my wheelchair and just kind of go out and ride around the sidewalks. And I will literally have dogs stop. And like their owners who have them on the leash have to stop quickly. And the dog wants to come over and see me. And 9 times out of 10, they let the dog come over. And I ask if I can pet them, and they just love me. And then there's this one dog that I see all the time, and she just thinks I'm her best friend.
Well, I think the issue is kind of the balance. We're all different.
Yep.
Nobody is the same as anybody else. I mean, there are these large differences like white, black, male and female. But actually, within those categories, we're all so different and unique. And the balance is, how do we honor those differences? Because they're beautiful, and that's what makes life interesting.
Yeah.
But how do we also then accord everybody equal respect and dignity? So how do we balance, the consciousness of difference, which I think is important, and on the other hand, the necessity of equality. Not equality is not the right word. Egalitarianism. You know what I'm saying?
Or just plain humanity.
Yes, exactly. Well, anyway, this poem, the poem I want to read, which is the first poem that I know you like this poem, which speaks to that and was actually written in response to, Whoopi Goldberg, who made some, what people called troubling comments on the show, The Review, the TV show, in which she said the Holocaust was not about race. And I think, and then she was off the show for 2 weeks, and she was castigated in many news outlets. And I to put her comments in context, I don't think she was saying it wasn't about people murdering Jews and other people they didn't like. I think she was really thinking about it from a kind of American racial context. And anyway, so we can go, I mean, that's
right.
differ on that. But anyway, this was my response in a kind of vague, general way to her, to that kind of scandal, that, little tempest. And it's called Against Sleepwalking. It is easy to forget. As a Jew, I forget often our whiteness is honorary, tolerated, from the Latin word for bearing, carrying, and enduring pain, claimed by moneylenders, suffered to underwrite white. It is easy to forget that all bias squirms in the same suburbs of a lizard brain, nasty with fear, bruised egos, swamp gas, adrenaline. It is easy to forget how readily I passed in a scrum of others without the root of light by which to bear, carry, endure, until I became what I had passed into. So it is a poem about passing, and about how Jews can pass as white, and
Right.
and it's easy to take refuge in that majority identity. But it is a falsification in some way of my identity. On the other hand, Jews have been quite persecuted for being Jews. So again, there's that knife edge balance there between how much do we applaud or go public with our identities, and how much do we want to just fit into the general common public and not be noticed, not be the round peg that's being pounded into the square hole.
Yeah. I understand that, because there's sometimes when you just kind of want to blend in and disappear, and then other times you want to be recognized for who you are. And I've always told, I think that people should be true to who they are, and it makes me sad when there are people, human beings in this world, who think they have to hide who they truly are because someone's going to hate them because they're different.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, we're all different. We're not the same.
Right.
The condition I have is not the same as anyone else has. And
in fact, you're different from your earlier self.
Oh yeah, we all have so many different versions of ourselves.
Exactly.
And even in like who we are now, I'm obviously not the same person I was when I was 20 or even 40. But I think 40 was the mark when I realized, like, oh yeah, I'm so many different people. But even with talking to people, even being with people now, or being by ourselves, we adapt. We become a version of a mother or a sister, or and being a mother of small children is a lot different than being a mother to adults.
Right. Yes.
We're all so many, we are just different versions of, who we want to be and who we're around. We wouldn't talk to our boss like they were our best friend unless they were, so there's so many things. It's like I think of all the ways my different versions of my dad, and I was thinking about that, and now he's a version where he's not that at all.
Right.
He's not even who he was as a person or anything. He's like a broken shell.
Right.
And
but he's still in there.
Yeah, he's still in there, and for some reason he still smiles.
That's good. He's still in there. It's amazing how we do retain something of a core self, a core being, that we never lose. I think that's really true. And it's interesting to think how we absorb, how do we get these ideas about difference and who's better and who's worse and what's good and what's not good? Where do they come from?
Yeah.
This is what in part what the book struggles with is kind of looking at where I think my attitudes came from, and how painful they are. And there's one sonnet in the book, which is called The Golden Rule. And my golden rule is how not to do to others what was done to us.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, yes. We, Jews as a group suffered a huge, what we call the Holocaust, a horrible genocide.
Yeah.
And look at what Jews are now doing to other people, to Palestinians.
I know.
This is beyond belief.
Yeah.
I don't want to open this whole can of worms, but it's kind of beyond belief. But there have been other Holocausts and other genocides that humanity has perpetrated on people, how did we get there? How have we allowed ourselves to do this? And in part, it's how we train children and how we think about and what we fear. I think it's about fear.
I think so. Yeah. If somebody doesn't understand something, or they don't know the truth about something, they try to act like it doesn't exist, or they don't want to be part of it, or it turns them into hate.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have, that is your golden rule. Mine is something I learned from my mother. I learned a lot of things from my mother. But the one thing was to be kind.
Mm.
And when I'm angry at someone, or I have those feelings of, I don't like you. I just don't like those feelings at all.
Mm.
And my mom, she never thought she was good enough, but she was like the most kindness and generous person I had ever met. And she loved children and took care of over 50 children plus her 5 that she had.
Mm-hmm.
But that was she didn't have to say, Amy, you need to be nice, you need to be kind, don't judge people. I saw how she was, and then I was able to become kind of like that, because she didn't have to tell me to do that. It's like my kids. I didn't have to tell them to say thank you and open the door for people. They just learned from my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be nice if some people change their behavior so the next generations will be more inclined to accept all of our differences.
I think we're getting there. I mean, I hate to seem like a kind of Girl Scout about this, but I think the arc of justice is very long. I think we're kind of in a little backwater right now, a little backlash. But I do think when I talk to young people, I talk to my children who are, grown but young, and their friends, and why they're disillusioned and why they're not voting, and, why they think it's hopeless to them. We need to have a more communitarian spirit. We need to, that mother's love that you're talking about, the model that your mother gave you without words,
right,
but actions, is the most important kind of love, because it is a kind of selfless love. And when I say that, I'm aware that women have been taught to be selfless, and that's been a problem. And we need to take ourselves back and honor ourselves. And good mothers do that. Right.
Yeah, because if you can't take care of yourself, then how can you take care of your children?
Exactly. And how do we take care of the world? But if we had that as a model, that kind of, not selfless, but that giving kind of love that opened it to everybody, I think there would be less hate in the world. There would be less, I don't know, this just sounds, so optimistic, but I do think we have the critical tools and the emotional tools to get where we need to go. We know really how things work. We know that fear and hatred always ends up redounding to the people who feel it. They dwarf your soul, and they disfigure your soul.
Exactly.
So we know that. So then the question is, how do we get that love, that kind of platonic love, right? The non-romantic love that you started talking in the beginning.
Yeah.
Romantic. It's not about, this kind of passion. It's about a love of humanity. It's not eros, but it's a kind of deep love of people and the earth. That's the other thing we have to love, because we've really done a bad job.
I know.
Loving the earth, and we're all feeling the repercussions of that. So that's really, and we know it. We know we have the information. We know it. The question is, how do we apply this? How do we make it work in our daily lives? How do we change our values so that they respect the goals, the ends that we want? And we're not quite there yet. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I want to thank you very much for being a guest on my podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. And when you finish your next book, please send me a copy, because I definitely want to read it.
I definitely will. It's fun. It's fun to rethink the origin story from a different perspective. And
I would definitely have you back on the show when that comes out. So
good.
I love having you on.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. If you wish for you or your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be well, and always be kind. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. If you are looking to be on the podcast or looking for a book review, you can go to amysbookshelfreviews.com and look for the appropriate navigational menu. Again, thank you all for listening and being a supporter of this podcast and of the Amy's Bookshelf Reviews professional reviewers
of books and audiobooks. Thank you all. Be safe and be well.